Hi everyone, welcome to the Performance Cafe. Specifically, I'd like to welcome you to the fourth episode of the Coffee Companion series, where we share coffee, biscuits, and learning every Friday as we talk about human performance in organizations. Today, we're joined by Paul Ruinaard. Paul is the Regional Sales Director, Sub-Saharan Africa for Nutanix. He has 30 years worth of sales experience in the IT industry, and he developed an interest in why some people always perform at the top of their game and what they're doing differently to everyone else. This led him to becoming interested in tools and frameworks that can be used to understand and motivate people. He soon realized that this is a moving target. What was good 5 years ago is later just average, so people have to continually reinvent themselves to stay relevant. This is particularly pertinent in the current business environment. It's not the new normal, but it's certainly business unusual or business different from anywhere else. Paul, welcome. It is lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Only a pleasure. So, Paul, I met you when I was a panelist on a Nutanix webinar, and it was certainly lovely speaking with you and the other panelists. I wanted to ask you just to give us a little bit of background on you and where the Enneagram came from.
So, thanks for having me. I've spent the last 30 years, as you said, in the IT industry and selling roles, working for various different vendors. And over the time, you started to realize that, performance management with people is really, you start focusing on the softer issues. And I came across frameworks like Myers-Briggs and DISC and things like that. And then I stumbled into Enneagram. And I found it to be one of probably the most prescriptive frameworks, because it really helps you to understand how people behave when under pressure. And I started to use it in sales, and then I found out it's been used extensively in coaching, and it's like a secret code that you have, with people who are coaches, psychologists, human performance, human capital specialists. They all understand it. So it's been very revealing and very useful when trying to adapt your style to talk to other, people, especially in the IT industry. You arrive with a lot of high-tech people who maybe points are much more analytical, and you've got to learn how to sell to them and learn how to pitch according to their requirements. You can't keep your natural style. So that's a bit of the background and where I've been using it.
And so it's very interesting. Do you mind sharing what your Enneagram number is?
Yeah, I'm an 8, and you'll find that actually you can type the cultures in a lot of the high-tech IT organizations. You'll find a lot of 3, 7, 8. And also ones. So you tend to end up with this proliferation of points in this groupthink. So it's pretty tough for the less extroverted type points to survive in this sort of high-tech selling environment that we see. And that's always a problem. That's problematic from a team performance point of view.
I'm a 7, so we'd make good companions, or at least we're close to each other on the Enneagram. Tell us, can you just explain for those not in the know what the Enneagram is and how it works?
So it kind of, it gives you a point. So it's very interesting. It's used by the CIA, it's used by the Jesuits, it comes out of the Sufi Muslim thinking. So it's got religious background, but it's also used in intelligence communities. It gives you a point of reference as to how your type of personality operates and what you see in your worldview. And then it gives you a point of where you go under pressure or where you go in a healthy state. And that's very unusual. Other the frameworks like Myers-Briggs never could give me that. So, for example, a 5 is a highly analytical point. You'll find a lot of them in technical roles in the IT industry, software developers, people who work in a very precise information base. I've got, for example, 2 of my technical guys are 5s. So if I want to talk to them in their language, they're always going to want to have specific referenceable chunks of information. Now, you'll find a lot of those guys in IT ops as well. So I have had to adapt my style as to how I'm going to reference them. So these sort of things start to combine when aha moments start happening as to how this all fit together. So Enneagram can be used to explain why you and your wife do or don't get on. My wife's a 2, 8, 2 are points of integration and disintegration. There's a lot of really rich information in this, and it's very deep. You can go into spiritual dimensions, you can go into work dimensions. I actually did a piece of training where I got an Enneagram practitioner in to profile the whole team, and then adapted the way we were managing the team. And the results were spectacular because people were recognized, and they felt that the language, the way that they were being managed reflected their needs rather than using a standard framework. And it brings out a different discussion with people.
Do you also find that it's about leveraging all 9 personalities and not just focusing on just one or just one way of being?
So interesting. I think the biggest challenge we face, especially in the IT industry, is groupthink. We get into this thing where we all affirm. So one of the technical guys I work with is an 8 as well. So we agree with each other on everything. And it creates this bit of a scorched earth environment for people that are not equally as risk-taking or prone to pioneering ideas. They're much more consultative, which would frustrate an 8. Okay, so what happens is with this ideal world, we want all the points represented, which will give you balance across the team. And in a 100-year flood, you're going to have somebody who's capable of coping with an environment. So, for example, I think now under the pandemic, the type of skills that are required to manage teams that are where you have to be much more consultative and involved in listening to the teams that you were working with, that wouldn't come naturally to me. I'm going to be much more out there pioneering ideas. So this idea of having to be able to adapt your type or to have points better represented, it gives you balance across the team and allows you to manage roles much better than just in a natural style, which for me is like on a disc. I'm also very high D, so I'll always go into a directional prescriptive mode, whereas you need to be much more consultative in a situation like a pandemic. So I don't know if that answers it.
Yes, it actually does, because you're quite right. And I think that's one of the issues that we've had in corporates as well, is the groupthink, because everyone who gets hired does tend to have the similar training, the similar personality, where actually what you're saying is right. We need all 9. We need to prepare for all eventualities, not just those that we know. But your love of the Enneagram, as you said, came through your other love of sales. And specifically in IT. And I wanted to ask you, it just seems like, digital transformation has just been sped up by COVID and the lockdown. Is Big Brother watching? Is it really that bad that we have to watch out what we say, where we say, how we say it, what we type at work? Is there really that much surveillance in IT in organizations?
Yeah, so I think there is a level of paranoia around digital channels that has developed, specifically like now where you've seen this case with Discovery, where they've dismissed employees for a WhatsApp group. So you've got to be really careful about what you put out on digital channels, because I'm very happy that records don't exist of the stupid things that I did when I was young, but now there's a permanent digital record of everything that these people are doing. And the blackface incident with Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, where something he did a long time ago when he was pretty young, gets played forward in a situation that's not actually realistic. So I think that's the one aspect. But to be honest, I think the other thing is that with the massive movement into work from home, people became paranoid about whether people are actually working. And there was this thing: do we now start using keystroke loggers? Because if you look on for example, a WebEx, there are tools that will show you when somebody is not, for example, looking at the camera and browsing. So you can be on a WebEx, but they're actually busy on other tools, So you can tell when your employees aren't actively engaged. So now this becomes a little bit introspective, because to hold your attention span in a digital medium for a long time is a very, very difficult thing to do. It has to be highly interactive, and not everybody's good at that. So now bosses are going, well, of this WebEx, you spend 20 minutes browsing other rubbish. Well, the fact you were a terrible presenter is also possibly contributing to that fact as well. But I think the other thing now becomes, we are starting to use tools that will, like we talked about earlier, you've got to reinvent yourself. There's a sales process. Some of the tools can be additive in that the information you're getting out of things. We use tools in Nutanix like Zoom Info. And the information we're getting is mind-boggling. I can tell you, for example, when an organization was searching for a topic or for an area, who it was, what their roles were, their contact details, things like this. And you take that and you plug that into a good seller who's now, because one of the things is we worried about, have we got enough leads? Have we got enough pipeline of opportunities? So a good seller is now creating a digital conversation using all this information because he's seeing interest in a particular area, like work from home. We need to take a whole lot of people off site. That's positive. That's where all of a sudden I start getting information around topics that I've been Googling on. I've probably got a much higher propensity to respond. So with the correct conversation and scripting in a digital campaign, my pipeline generation goes up. So that's great. The same is true when you start looking at, now we've got a guy who hasn't sent out the required 100 emails today, or he hasn't done his 50 cold calls or something like that. Now, that's when it starts getting, well, are we managing on metrics? Now, as you get up the value chain, we're seeing that, in the high end of the enterprise market, it's going back to face-to-face. We're not going to see customers spend tens of millions of dollars on equipment unless they've met somebody, worked out what the support organization is, have tested the product. So it's going back to a lot of physical high-touch selling. But in the mid-market and the low-end space, it's becoming much more digital and it's becoming consumption-based. So, this story around we're buying things like Netflix on a subscription basis. We're buying music on a subscription basis. We're also going to be willing to buy licensing to applications on an app based. So we're going to start seeing organizations that are consuming cloud and things like that start to use ad hoc purchases to consume services that they want to use. So that's going to totally change. So the way we sell to those people is going to change because, and now you start getting into, at which point do AI or robotic process or RPA, robotic process automation, start sort of fulfilling the demand? Half the time people are talking to a bot when they're busy typing into a chat box, and only when the conversation gets above what the bot can answer does the session get established to a remote agent that may be sitting in a home environment like this and then picks up the call. So there's a lot of automation, and this has changed, and to your point earlier, it's changed fast, and people are looking to take costs out, so they quickly are learning, that there's going to be a lot of pressure, and roles that may have been high values roles, or where we had people doing them, are going to become increasingly automated. And when you move down that continuum of fulfillment, it's going to become more and more automation, and the high value roles are going to have still exist. But it's a fast changing environment. My parallel to this is what happened in the .com boom, and then in Y2K. So in the IT industry, we had two big sticks to beat everybody with. Y2K, which was, if you don't replace it, we're not sure it's going to work. So that was the one reason to. And the second was .com boom. They wanted to be in the new world of a .com, which was going to impact their share price. So between the two, it wasn't really difficult to sell. You had customers that were willing to throw money at events. 2 years later, if you couldn't use financial selling to justify getting a project across the line because they saw what we did, so now all of a sudden they closed the taps. Now you went from a tornado market, and tornado markets, turkeys can fly in tornadoes because look at the wind. Wait until you turn the wind off, and then you'll see how turkeys can fly. So you got this situation where if you couldn't adapt to this new world of having to sell in a financial metric, you were dead, and people left the industry in droves, And I think you're going to see similar now, unless you can survive in a really, really tough environment. using new tools and learning new tricks, you're gonna have a pretty big decanting of the industry, because it's a tough place to live, and across the board, it's really, really hard. People are counting every penny. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Cool. So I wanted to ask you, and we've had this discussion offline as well. So many people live in fear of the technology and that it's going to take over jobs and that we're being watched and what have you not. And for me, there's always the side that I want to understand, how does this work for the employee? How does it work for the manager to establish a better team? What does this tech do for us, if anything?
Yeah, I think it's challenging because all change is disruptive, and anything that starts to expose, process, can be seen to be negative. So the people that are having the scrutiny, for example, saying, well, look, maybe if you upped your activity ratio and hunted more of the following type of leads, you would do better. And it comes down to, I think, performance management as well, and using the tech to kind of demonstrate the point, So especially with the changes around the pandemic, performance management is something that's becoming pretty, front of mind. And it's tough because as managers, we tend to, we do two or three things. One, we worry that the territory is going to be uncovered, so we don't do the performance management early enough. Two, we hope the role player is going to get better, so we don't engage the situation earlier. And then we end up probably pulling the team down. So this drags the whole thing out. And if we use the tools to kind of look at the models of what good looks like and then play it out to other people, you find quickly that they change, because they go and then, an average to good person goes, well, let me see what the best person in the team is doing, have a call with them and work out what I'm not doing and pick that up. And I think so it's got to do a lot with the approach and the willingness to make the change, because this is a continually moving target. All we've done is accelerated the speed of change that we're hitting. So it's a tough one to say, because there's always going to be the more introspective, metric-driven approach that is going to become what people don't want to see or they feel. So there's always a hesitance around tools and a feeling that there's going to be some sort of management dashboard that exposes me, and those metrics are just. And I think the real thing behind this is a metric of value. Now, I was having a discussion earlier, and sometimes the higher you go up the feeding chain, the less you are at the coalface. So you don't understand. So you're relying on information and systems, and then you remove from the actual day-to-day conversation, so you don't have a touch as to what's going on in the region. And that's where I think it comes down to, you really, really need to get in touch with the people that are involved and get their feeling and opinion, because there's still the flair of the human touch that will, good guy, and when you've seen how they forecast or they predict what's going on in a deal, you develop a sense of confidence around them. So it's very difficult to quantify that into a metric or a measurement. There's confidence metrics and flow and all sorts of things on deals that you can get right now. Tons of tools around this space that is going on. But there's also, for example, there's a tool that we are looking at, which would require us to have GDPR compliance on it. So you can't just start collecting data about an employee without the correct underlying frameworks and the authorities and permission. And you've got to look at where you're operating, what environments, what the regulatory and HR frameworks look like, which I think is more in your wheelhouse than mine. But there's a lot going on in this space.
So what I hear you saying is that it can't just be tech, because tech can't infer. It can't see what's probable. It can only sort of determine, well, this would normally be the flow, or this is what we're seeing on sort of like on the paper. But actually, when we talk about the story behind it, it actually might have quite a different look and feel to it. So maybe these tools are then dependent on the knowledge and the management and maybe the culture of an organization that's using them?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the whole continuum you're talking about there is, going from information to intelligence. And this is like we're collating so many gazillions of data points right now that we have the information. It's growing in bigger and bigger stores. We've digitized so many processes that we can start to extract patterns. So the software now starts to give us, intelligence about certain things, but you still haven't got to the point that you have an automated process that then kind of makes a decision or an inference from that, and you act on it. So you definitely, we're seeing everybody using these big data tools, and data architects, and this sort of extraction is becoming a massive industry. But you still have to have the knowledge, the underlying knowledge of what this stuff means. Some of them, when you start to collate them and give them to an experienced seller, and I've seen this with some of the people, it becomes almost poetry. They're able to get meetings with customers because we're able to expose or become relevant to what they want to talk about. So you don't waste people's time. You're starting to, on the reverse, you can also, you can get flooded by campaigns because everybody's gone digital straight away. And we see just thousands of LinkedIn's, mails. I mean, mails dead. So what are we now? We're on WhatsApp. Now we're spamming WhatsApp. Now we're just using every technique known to man. That's not intelligence. And then right at the end of the scale, which is really funny, there's a graphic where sort of somebody pencils in the dragon and connects the dot type plot. All these dots are being connected into a pattern. And then there's the conspiracy theorist that exists at the end of it all to explain why it's the Illuminati or somebody looking over your shoulder all the time.
So, leads me to our next question. Tech enablement and remote work. Is it all about the tech?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, this one, because the tech is an enabler. It allowed us to transition a whole lot of people into Zoom and Zoom and Teams and things like that. So now all of a sudden we were able to communicate. I mean, imagine, I think you mentioned Herman. He said, imagine if the pandemic had happened in the middle of SMSs and dial-up modems. It would have been a disaster. So, how would we have done this? We would all sit at home and we managed to operate in a degraded state using tech that was, prior to this, really quite clunky. If you were doing a face-to-face meeting and you had some guy on video, he was always like forgotten about. Or now all of a sudden we used to mixing channels. Okay. We can do things. We've seen a whole lot of things happen. Like the next evolution, I was thinking about what happens when you start with virtual reality headsets. All of a sudden you're in meeting rooms with people. Starts getting a little bit interesting. So there are some spins around this that are quite interesting, but I think tech is an enabler of the remote work type environment. It happened extremely quickly, and these tools got people into an environment where they could feel productive and useful and were able to work from home. Now what's happened is, of course, the question is, are they ever going to come back, and what percentage of people are going to come back? So I've heard metrics from anything from 100 to 300% increases in productivity, which is considerable. So I think there is an aspect of it that was people were willing to or willing to do whatever was required because they were happy to have a job, and there were so many cases of people losing jobs. So people worked extremely hard, and I think there'll be a normalization around this. So the tech is invasive. You have to learn to. We don't have time to integrate the information. I've done 15 Zooms in a day, So tech is there. If you don't now put time in your diary to actually integrate the information, which was your car trip that you used on the way home, to think about it and make 5 phone calls to your friends, you just never ever get to actually do that. And so there's a lot of, it's moving all the time. You're learning how to operate in this new environment, and it's very much what we knew 3 months ago is totally different to what we knew now. So it's moving extremely quickly.
And do you think that remote work is here to stay? And the reason I ask you this is because you're right, there has been a massive uptick in productivity, but at the same time, a lot of companies battled because with COVID, there wasn't a proper transition and strategy for remote work in place. So for a lot of companies, it was very disastrous and a rather hard road to get it right the first time around.
Yeah, and I think to your point earlier, and it comes back to like the Enneagram space, at what cost? Because I think a lot of the uptick in productivity came out of a sense of I need to do whatever I can to do my job, make myself productive, stay employed, look after my family. So we went deep into the well of I'm going to see this thing out. Now we got to come back from that to kind of address the some of the human cost of this pandemic and try and make the people feel that there is some security there, that they're not just going to live on this heightened state of stress, or I mean personally the stress levels are much higher. So I think there's going to be a normalization, and this is the thing is it's going to be in the mix. I drove around, I was really happy to get out after the lockdown started lifting, but you saw all these empty office parks. Like, what's the future of work? What's it going to feel like to go into your office? I've done it, and it's like really, really a bit like going back to the scene of the crime. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have the same warmth and things like that. So I think it's all work in process. It's not just a flash in the pan. Definitely, all the metrics are stating that. I think in the high net worth industries or value added selling and types like that, and physical processes, you're going to have a lot of people, who are going to go back to a face-to-face type meeting. But there's a lot of the work that has shifted into a from home type environment. So yeah, I think we all looking at this and going, where does it land? But it's definitely brought something ahead that we didn't anticipate, and fortunately for us, the tech was there, and tech enabled this transition. Now we've created a Frankenstein's monster's got a hold of us and disappeared down the road. Now we've got to get back in control of it.
Indeed. And I think that's part of the concern, is sort of like, how do you pop the genie back into the bottle, and get people back to the office. So you mentioned again, and I'd like us to talk a bit about performance in the Enneagram. I know we've spoken about earlier, but besides tech, because for me, as a people, for me, the important thing is that I think tech is a great enabler, but I don't think you can hide poor management practice and the inability to lead behind it. And I think that's part of the shock that people had when moving to remote now, is that if you weren't a great manager when you were in the office, it's very difficult to all of a sudden be one over Zoom. And I wanted to ask you, you've had years of experience with the Enneagram and trying to optimize a sales team in a very competitive industry. What are some of your learnings that you can share with us?
Yeah, good question. I think the way I saw it was, what I got interested in was, why do some people on the surface of it do the same thing as other people, but one person really seems to excel? So the discussion around what do people do, or how do you get that really, really high performing person to produce the results that they do? Because that's all that you really get interested in. A guy who's able to consistently perform. What is the difference? And that's where I strayed into finding that the issues are actually much more related to more around the human capital management and the soft issues. So firstly, what the guys were doing, they were able to understand their customers and empathize a lot more, learn, they were much more professional in their technique. Simple things like open-ended questioning is not simple. It's extremely difficult. You've got to learn it, rehearse it, and play it forward. And then you found that they had an understanding of their customers that was, basically almost like unusual. Okay, and that's where Enneagram came in. And then working with these people to start understanding what they were doing, it started to expose that they were using a lot of soft metrics and techniques to understand their customers. And when I then started to stray into Enneagram was where I started to find out that this could explain why Ken at whatever bank did the following things. So when I was in a role having to present information to him, I would change the way I pitched, okay? And all of a sudden, I started to resonate with him, okay? Because I then learned that he's probably a 5, which is a highly analytical point that you're going to see in an ops environment, and he does not like fluffy type stuff. He wants fact-based presentation. Whereas if you've got a guy who is running really, really complex systems, he's going to want a certain amount of information from you. So when you, for example, going through a process of trying to pioneer a new technology or a product to him, you have to reach the point that his comfort as that point is addressed. He has to be comfortable. And that's a process of going through completely iterative, like talking to him about what the risk would be. Okay, is risk your issue? Therefore, this point would weight heavily on risk. Spend a lot of time talking to him about the risk. So you found that the information you were giving and the profile you built of your customer allowed you to address their needs a lot better. And you started to get to the point where you were almost, you anticipated. And it allowed you to then align with their needs much better. And what that would do was the guys would go, well, yeah, you understand what we want, and at that stage, you're probably in a good place, because I'm always going to buy from somebody that's going, yeah, we understand what you want, and here's the solution to your problem, and this is why it'll fix your problem, And it's a much better environment. So it does lend itself to giving you a foot up over the competition, where you don't necessarily understand. You're going in there with information because you understand typically what the guy would want, okay, and you're using that to craft your message to allow you to get more information, whereas your competitors just going, well, are we the cheapest, or are we the best, or it's not crafted. So that really was an eye-opening moment. And then the other thing is retaining these guys. When you got the top performing teams, if a guy feels recognized and his needs are addressed, he's going to stay with you above where, how I work for Nutanix because I believe in the culture of the organization and the CEO and the way he goes about his business. And as I've got older, that's become more important to me, because my reputation and who I am in the industry and what I'm doing is my whole reason I'm here. This is my package. So I work for a company that's got an alignment around that. And it's the same with retaining, high-performing people. Sure, high-performing people probably cost a lot more, but they also work for people. And if you're able to address that and make them feel like their values align with your values and the organizational values, then you'll retain them. And other people will come along and say, we're going to pay you more. And they're going to, that's not why we're working for them. We believe in the product. We believe in the people. We believe in the cause of the company, the mission of what we're doing. And as I've got older, that's become more important, because I can wake up at night and go, actually, I'm willing to get up this morning and, go and do some difficult things because I believe in what I'm doing. If you don't believe, it becomes work. It becomes hard.
It does. And so what it sounds like is almost an organizational culture that's been established around optimizing my messages for someone else. So it's almost a very high level of empathy from a perspective, and I'm going to throw a stereotype at you. The IT guy is like a numbers and that kind of guy. He's not a soft, fluffy guy, so you don't get him to be empathetic. What you're saying is, even if it's an intellectual empathy, they are learning to accommodate each other and, each other and other people and their clients, and learning to speak another language to make collaboration better and customer service better.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you look at it at a certain abstraction, and this is getting highly theoretical, sales guys or good salespeople are able to empathize with their customers' needs over and above their own. Okay. And when you have an experience of like a great waiter or a really good sales guy, it's not selling. It's like, you're going to go to your friends and say, you got to go and see this guy. He's the best I've ever dealt with.
Yes.
He knew exactly what I wanted just before I said it. He had everything. So it's that sort of a thing is the nirvana of it. The really top guys are like that. And I think it's like you say, it's almost like a balance between being empathetic to what they need, and everybody talks about this. It's also, you've got to live the value. When some of these, highly complex IT systems are burning, and a large enterprise has a problem and the bank's website is down or something, it gets very, very hot in the kitchen at that stage, and you've got to be willing to stand in that fire with them. And a lot of companies are now learning that that's the difference. But those are the the moments where it really starts to count, and that's where the relationships are really forged. But it's few and far between that happens. So you're now trying to build up that relationship to ensure that they believe that you will, respond like that. And it's the same as like all of these situations where it's easy to claim things, but to demonstrate the values of where things really happen. And that's what I see as being important. It's a very high level of empathy when you get it right. But at the same time, when you get it wrong, and there's a mismatch between what the customer believed he was getting and what you actually told him, then it creates chaos, and it can become very, can become almost litigational. You end up with many people like that. And I think the other thing about this is that people start getting involved in technique. So, reading people's body language and all sorts of metrics that they think you can, and if you execute those without a genuine intent, I think people have got a very high level bullshit detector that it's non-genuine. So they quickly work out that you are more all facade and face, and there's actually nothing behind it. And it's a key thing. You can't lie to people. They pick it up very, very quickly, around these things, and they understand. They've been there. A lot of these people are professional. They've been there before. They know exactly what's going on.
So what you're saying is it's like many other tools. Whether you use it ethically or not is up to you. It's not about the tool itself. Whether I use the Enneagram for manipulation or whether I use it to refine my understanding of someone so I can better service their needs, two totally different ball games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the one thing. It'll give you an insight as to why somebody behaves like they do, and why they will probably respond positively or negatively to a certain stimulus. And you can get very deep into it, but that's kind of really useful. I walk into a meeting and I quickly pick up the signs maybe that this guy's a certain type and change the messaging on the fly to meet his needs. If I then start using this to now say, well, maybe become more technically what I'm not, and for example, I will struggle with empathy as an 8. Let's say, let's just be out there. I'm not going to. A lot of people will tell you that. So if I start becoming all empathetic, and it's very much something that I don't wear well. Okay, so the result will be that they'll pick up that this is not my natural style. People do that. They understand when you're being genuine. So that will become incongruent almost. So it starts getting into this. Do what you do with the best intent, and stop getting into all the technical tools. Do I sit next to the customer? Do I tap him on the elbow to get his attention? All this stuff. It's not. You can watch thousands of videos of it. It doesn't work, in my opinion.
So, question that I do have for you is, you're talking about authenticity. So if I then adjust my approach to accommodate someone else's personality profile or their Enneagram profile, are there people that I won't match up with? And what do I do as the leader of a team if I've got an 8 who I cannot send to a 4, for want of a better comparison?
Yeah, I've been in workshops where people have come up to me, and I've had the experience where, for example, so this is the sort of thing where 8s are very quick to anger, but they're very quick to forgive. So I would, for example, have a discussion with another 8, which would get quite heated, and I would clear the office and leave other people hyperventilating and heading for the exit. And then I'd walk out of my office and, where's everybody gone? Well, they thought there was fire and brimstone and scorched earth around. I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. So there is an aspect of it that you're going to need to adapt your style, which is the real learning, and it's a tough thing to do. It's extremely tough. But this is now getting into the soft aspects of management. I think that if you are willing to acknowledge your style and then try and adapt it to accommodate somebody else, that is often seen as enough. In other words, I may not be good at it, but I'm making an effort or something like that. And you'll learn an enormous amount, and be willing to hear and adapt is going to win you a lot of acknowledgement, I think. And I think the other thing that is around this is people feel they are being seen and heard. And once that happens, there's a willingness to explain, which then brings somebody else's point of view forward, which is an extremely valuable thing, okay? Because chances are I've missed it, okay?
Yeah.
And they will, if you listen to them, embroider it in layers of detail that, my wife's the 2. If I want a detail, I'll go and ask her for things. She'll go into soft aspects of things when she walked into the room that I never saw and I will never see. So if I acknowledge that I will never see it, but I'll ask her for that information and then I bring it on board, I've firstly got a much better view as to what's going on. And secondly, she's willing to expose detail that, you'd not normally get. So it's a real talent. It's not easy to achieve. I think 10, 15 years after learning this stuff, I still would skew towards action. It's my natural, let's just do it, whereas the other points in the room are going, we need to think about this and we need to think about that, but Paul's just headed off down the road once more, and he never listens to us, and we never feel heard, and what about this, and what about that risk, and this risk, and things like that. And there are actually valid inputs from them that, just a moment to reflect and say, does anybody have anything else to add? And they'll come out of the woodwork if they feel comfortable, Yeah. But that's some of my learnings around it,
That's awesome. That is true. So it's quite funny how spontaneous that is. The 7s that I am like to have fun. So someone will ask me, why do you open your business? And I said, because I thought it was going to be a lot of fun. And they're like, that's not the right reason to start a business. But to a 7, it's the ideal reason to start a business. I'm still having fun.
People and have fun.
We'll have fun. So in closing, I want to ask you, you spoke about 2 different sales modalities. Lower end will become much more online, sort of remote, and high end will be more person to person. Do you think that someone's personality will predispose them to one or the other? Do you think you'll have a salesperson that will prefer to sit on the other side of a screen and others who will go, oh, I can't wait to get back in between people?
Yeah, I think there's 2 pieces of that. The one is when you have sort of people who have learned one way of operating and been operating as typically older people who have been operating face to face for a long time, it's quite difficult to adapt to the new normal of the a completely online digital world with campaigns and things like that. So the digital native type sellers that the young kids are, who are, they surf multi-channel worlds they're having conversations across multiple chats and they're able to, there was no time in their life there wasn't an internet. They did not understand a world without an internet, without Google and things like that. So the thing is that the digital natives are coming through in a fashion that they can just drive these channels. What are you talking about? LinkedIn, Zoom Info, and People AI, all of these things. They just naturally suck up this information. So what was then interesting was with the pandemic hitting, people went into digital campaigns in a big way. But we found with the digital natives that they weren't able to make the assessment of the buying signals or the knowledge that they were getting back. So, for example, they could get a hit, okay, where somebody went, actually, I'm really quite interested in what you had to say there. That's very interesting. And they would start to flounder because they didn't now have the experience or the knowledge of a seasoned campaigner to now move the prospect forward through the phases. So I think that you're always going to have the situation where your years and years of experience are going to kick in. I think the 1 + 1 = 3 moment is when you start combining the two, okay? And all of a sudden, the information we're getting is going to be worth a lot more. So that's the high road scenario. I think there are certainly always going to be types of scenarios where the sellers are never really going to be comfortable in this, and we see it in, for example, our go-to-market is through a tiered organization, so we've got resellers and partners, and some of them are much better than others, and some of them deal, for example, with let's stereotype it, the agricultural industry, or farmers, or the mining industry. Those people dig rocks out of the ground, they put things into the ground. They are the late majority of the digitization, although with analytics and digital information around their processes or watering, you can sell them a lot more. But anyway, long story short, they're still going to be people who probably are likely to meet face to face because their value system and the type of people they are is different. So I think it's going to be a mix. It's always a continuum, but there are going to be I think it's going to be a swing back. People are going to want to meet face to face, and then it's going to normalize and balance out. But we brought ahead the transition to digital channels by, I don't know, maybe this would have taken 10 years. We did it in 6 months.
Yes.
So there's a hell of a lot of, shrapnel along the way that has happened, So yeah, that's what I see.
Awesome. If anyone would like to reach out to you, where can they get hold of you?
Yeah, with pleasure. Email address is paul.ruinaard@nutanix.com. Feel free to send me anything or any information you'd like me to look at.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was really a lovely talk, and I do enjoy the Enneagram so much. Thank you for sharing your teachings on the Enneagrams, on sales, on Big Brother, and all the lot. And I do hope that we will see you at the Performance Cafe again sometime soon.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me. It was lovely talking to you, and I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Paul. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us for another episode of the Coffee Companions at the Performance Cafe. We hope that you found this episode very exciting. And if you did, please like us on our YouTube channel, follow us on our LinkedIn and our Facebook profiles, and please remember to comment and share. Until next time, I hope to see you again at the Performance Cafe.